All right, let's jump right into a really big question today. Is it possible for a major world religion like Islam to also be a deeply logical system? Now, our goal here isn't to convince you one way or the other. It's simply to understand the framework from the inside out and to explore the case for Islam as a rational way of looking at the world. So, how do we even start to tackle this? Well, the sources we're looking at take a pretty interesting approach. We're not going to start with scripture or specific rituals. Nope. We're starting with the fundamental questions that pretty much every single person asks themselves, no matter who you are or where you're from. Okay, so that brings us to our first big idea here. This is all about something we all share, that universal search for meaning, that quest to figure out our place in the universe. So, what are these big questions? Well, our sources boil it down to three fundamental ones. First up, origin. How did all this, the universe, us, how did it even get here? Then there's the end. What's the end game? What happens when we die? And maybe the one that hits us the hardest day to day, purpose. Why are we even here? What are we supposed to be doing with our time? Now, when you look at how different cultures have tried to answer that first question, the how did it all begin one, you get some really fascinating stories. We're talking about gods mating, a giant cosmic egg, a deity popping out of a lotus flower, really complex myths. But then the Islamic account is presented as something completely different. It's incredibly simple and direct, one single, all-powerful creator who did it all on purpose. And that super simple answer to the origin question, it's actually the cornerstone for something much, much bigger. The sources we're looking at don't just present Islam as a religion in the typical sense, they frame it as a complete system for making sense of reality. They call it an explanatory model. So what on earth is an explanatory model? Well, you can think of it like a complete toolkit for your mind. It's a framework that's designed to give you solid, coherent answers to those three big questions we just talked about. Basically, it's a map for existence. And this model lays it all out nice and clear. You've got one creator, all-knowing, all-powerful. Creation, it all started from a single soul, Adam. The afterlife, yep, there's a day of judgment, leading to either heaven or hell. And our purpose in the meantime? Well, it's to live a good, righteous life. See, it's a really structured, logical worldview. And this isn't just some abstract theory, For some people, it clicks in a really profound way. Just listen to this from Shema, a convert from Uganda. She said she had gaps inside her, and that she found Islam filled those gaps, not just with blind faith, but with what she felt were logical explanations. That's a pretty powerful statement. Okay, but hang on a second. This brings up a really important question, right? The whole foundation of this model, God, the soul, the afterlife, it's all stuff we can't see. It's the unseen. So how can something based on the unseen possibly be called logical? This is a great point, and the sources have a really simple way of explaining it. We actually use this kind of logic all the time. Think about it. You walk into a room and it's full of smoke. You don't see the fire, but you know there's a fire, right? Or you wake up and the streets are wet. You didn't see it rain, but you conclude that it must have rained. It's the same idea here. You can use the evidence you can see, like the entire universe, to logically figure out there's an unseen cause behind it all. All right, so if the universe is the smoke, what's the evidence pointing to the fire? Let's dive into the specific arguments that the sources present to back up this whole explanatory model. The first piece of evidence they talk about is something internal, a concept called Fitra. The idea here is that every single person is born with this innate gut feeling, a natural disposition to recognize that there's a higher truth, a single creator. So the argument is that Islam isn't trying to teach you something new and strange. It's actually just aligning with a feeling you already have deep inside. Okay, so that's the internal evidence. The second, and really the main piece of external evidence, is the central text itself, the Quran. It's put forward as more than just a holy book. It's presented as a miracle that you can examine for yourself. And here's one of the central claims. It's inimitability. The Quran actually throws down a challenge to all of humanity, saying, go on, try to write even one chapter like this. And the sources we're looking at state that for over 1,400 years, nobody has been able to meet that challenge. So what are the specific arguments for its divine origin? Well, they're usually grouped into a few key areas. First, proponents point to what they call scientific insights. Things like detailed descriptions of how an embryo develops, written centuries before we had the science to know it. Then there were prophecies of future events, like foretelling a major victory for the Romans. There's also its linguistic style, which is considered so unique that even its biggest critics back in the day had to admit it was something special. And finally, its internal consistency. Over 6,000 verses, and the claim is not a single contradiction. And again, you can see how these arguments land with people in their personal stories. Take this quote from Janet, a convert from the Philippines. For her, it wasn't just one thing. It was the feeling that she had found a system with the clarity and comprehensiveness to explain, well, everything. That was the game changer for her. This brings us to a really fascinating idea at the heart of this worldview, the relationship between being intellectually convinced and the act of faith, or what's known as submission. You know, a lot of people think logic and faith are total opposites, right? That you have to switch off your brain to believe. But the sources here argue for the exact opposite. They say that reason is actually the road to faith. The idea is, once your mind is rationally convinced that the model is true, then willingly submitting to it becomes the most logical thing you can do. But what does submission actually look like day to day? It's not just some abstract idea. It's supposed to create a specific ethical state of mind called taqwa, which you could translate as God consciousness. And this is framed as the logical outcome of belief. In a world where everyone's competing, taqwa is the commitment to play fair, to succeed without stepping on others to get ahead. So, when you put all of this together, the logic, the evidence, the submission, what's the end result? According to our sources, it all leads to a life with a very clear, powerful sense of purpose. This historical quote just captures that feeling perfectly. You have this 7th century Muslim envoy, and he's asked by a powerful general, "Why are you guys here?" And his answer isn't about power or conquest. He says, "God has sent us to bring people from the narrowness of this world to its vastness, and from the injustice of other religions to the justice of Islam." I mean, wow, that's a mission statement. So at the end of the day, the argument is that this logical system doesn't just sit in your head, it completely changes your life. The sources claim it gives people exactly what so many are looking for, a real sense of meaning, a feeling of inner peace, and a strong sense of personal responsibility. And that really leaves us with one final thought. We've walked through the case for Islam as a logical system, but it points to a much bigger question for all of us. When any worldview provides someone with answers to those huge questions about where we came from, why we're here, and where we're going, what kind of power does that have to shape not just what they do, but who they become?